The bright morning sun filtered through the ornate windows of the grand church, casting a warm glow on the polished floor beneath me. I could feel the weight of my wedding dress pulling at me, not just from the layers of fabric, but from the expectation I had created for myself. I stood before the mirror, gazing at my reflection. At 28, I had everything lined up. Everything was supposed to be perfect. The dress was the right fit. The makeup was flawless. My heart was supposed to match the picture of calm and control that everyone expected. But the truth was, I wasn't in love. I wasn't even sure I knew what love was anymore. Oliver Gray, my fiancé, stood by the altar just out of sight, waiting for me with the kind of excitement only a man who had everything in his life organized could muster. Our families were gathered, friends and colleagues, all there to witness a perfect union between two seemingly perfect people. Oliver was successful, driven, the kind of man you could depend on, the kind of man you marry when you have a plan. Except I wasn't carrying his child. I ran my hand over my stomach beneath the corset, the flatness of it a reminder of the secret I carried in the deepest recesses of my mind. A mistake made at a fertility clinic that was supposed to be anonymous, safe. And now, at the precipice of my so-called perfect life, I felt that stone pressing deeper. As I adjusted my veil, Sarah, my maid of honor, smiled at me, her voice warm but distant. "You look beautiful." I barely registered the words, my mind drifting back to the pregnancy test I had hidden in my suitcase. A secret that I couldn't keep forever. The wedding guests were gathering, the excitement palpable. But today, nothing felt like it was mine. Not this dress, not this Scythe, and certainly not this baby. It was as if my world had been built on someone else's script, and today, that script would be torn apart. "Amelia, it's time." Sarah's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I nodded, my heart suddenly pounding against my chest. It wasn't nerves. I had no idea what this was. But as I stepped out of the bridal suite, I felt the weight of it all, of the life I was about to step into. Or perhaps the life I was being pushed into. My legs felt like they were carrying me down a road I hadn't paved, each step resonating with the knowledge that I was about to lose control. And then, the roar of engines shattered the stillness of the garden outside. And everything I thought I knew about my life would be torn apart in one single, impossible moment. As I stepped into the grand hall, ready to take my place beside Oliver, everything seemed to move in slow motion. The sound of my heels against the marble echoed in my ears. I could see the garden through the French doors beyond, a scene so perfect it felt almost surreal. But then, everything that was supposed to go as planned collapsed. The unmistakable sound of screeching tires, followed by the loud crash of an engine tearing through the manicured lawn. Guests scattered. I froze, my breath caught in my throat, not knowing what was happening or why. And then, as if out of nowhere, he appeared. James DeMarco, tall, with a presence that seemed to silence everything around him. His dark eyes met mine, unblinking, unyielding. And then, the words I never saw coming, the words that would change everything. "You're carrying my child." The words echoed in my head as though they were being repeated by a dozen voices all around me. My hands shook, the bouquet of white roses I had gripped so tightly now slipping from my fingers and falling to the ground with a soft thud, as if the world itself were imploding around me. James DeMarco's gaze remained fixed on me, cold and unyielding, his presence swallowing the space between us. The reality of what he'd just said hadn't fully hit me yet. My mind raced, scrambling to make sense of the impossible, but nothing could prepare me for what came next. "Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there." Now, hit that subscribe button and let's dive into the full story. Oliver stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell are you talking about?" His voice trembled, not with fear, but with the kind of rage one experiences when their world is being shattered into 1,000 pieces. "Get away from her!" He tried to pull me behind him, a desperate attempt to shield me, but I didn't move. My legs were rooted to the spot. James, however, wasn't intimidated. He simply raised a hand to stop Oliver, his eyes never leaving mine. "This isn't about you, Oliver," he said, his voice low and controlled. "This is about her and the child she's carrying." I felt a chill crawl up my spine, not just from his words, but from the overwhelming sense that something was terribly wrong. "You're lying," I whispered, my voice barely audible, as if even saying the words aloud might make them real. "I don't even know you. I've never met you before in my life. You have no right to say that." But James's expression didn't change. He wasn't angry or defensive or even smug. He was certain. And that certainty gnawed at me, tugging at the edges of my disbelief. The chatter of the wedding guests in the background faded into an indistinct blur, the world around me spinning as I tried to grasp the situation. My eyes met Oliver's, who was now pacing in frustration, his hands running through his hair. I could feel the panic building in him. "This is insane," he muttered under his breath, as though repeating it might make it less so. But James wasn't done. He stepped forward, his body language calm but assertive, and with a swift motion, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out an envelope, holding it out to me. "This is for you." I hesitated, my hand hovering over the envelope, unsure whether I should take it. But something in his demeanor, something that wasn't threatening, but too calm, compelled me to take it. I ripped it open, my fingers trembling as I pulled out a series of medical papers. I scanned them quickly, unable to process the words, the dates, the names on the pages, until one sentence stopped me cold. "Insemination procedure completed on Amelia Shaw with stored genetic material from James DeMarco." I stumbled backward, the room spinning around me. The papers fluttered from my hand as I tried to steady myself against the back of a chair. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. But the evidence, right in front of me, was undeniable. No, no. "This has to be a mistake," I whispered to myself, though my voice trembled. "You're wrong. The clinic. The donor was anonymous." James's gaze softened slightly, and for a brief moment, I saw something akin to pity in his eyes. "That's what they told you," he said quietly. "But the clinic was compromised. I had genetic material stored there years ago for personal reasons. I didn't know what they were doing with it until recently, until I found out about you." I stared at him, my mind reeling. "This is some kind of twisted joke. I don't even know you." "No, Amelia, this isn't a joke. It's a very real problem. And now it's your problem, too." He folded his arms, his jaw tightening. "That clinic was infiltrated by people who want to control me. They used you as an opportunity, not just for a child, but for leverage. You were never meant to be a part of this." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him, demand that he come it all back, that he explain what kind of sick game he was playing. But my legs were shaking too badly to hold me up. "What do you mean? Leverage for what?" James let out a sharp breath, glancing over at Oliver, who was still pacing, his face a mix of confusion and growing concern. "Leverage for everything," he said darkly. "You're carrying my child, Amelia. My enemies know about this. They'll use the baby to force my hand if I don't do what they want. I'm not just talking about money or territory here. They want to control me, and now they have you, and they have the child. Your life is in danger because of this." I felt my breath catch in my chest. It was too much to process. The anger, the confusion, the fear, it all threatened to crush me. I looked back at Oliver, his expression now one of disbelief. He was looking at me and then at James, as though weighing the situation, trying to piece together the truth. "What are you talking about?" Oliver demanded, his voice breaking. "You're saying this woman is carrying your child, and now you want to drag her into your world. You've got to be out of your damn mind." James didn't flinch. "I didn't ask for this, but it's happening. And now Amelia is involved, whether she wants to be or not." I was barely hearing what he was saying. My mind was still stuck on the fact that I was pregnant with a stranger's child, a mafia boss's child. How had I ended up here? How had my life, which had once seemed so neatly mapped out, spiraled into a mess of lies, betrayal, and now, danger? "Amelia." James's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because I have no choice. You're already in danger because of me, and I'm going to protect you." I flinched at the word protect. It sounded so cold coming from him. He didn't care about me. He was just trying to manipulate me, right? Just another pawn in his game. But something about his tone made me hesitate. He didn't sound like a man trying to control me. He sounded like a man who knew exactly how dangerous his world was and how little he could do to change the circumstances. For a brief moment, I wondered, was he telling the truth? Was my life really in danger because of this child? "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "I don't need your protection. I'm not part of this. I don't know who you are, and I don't want to know. I'll leave. I'll get out of here, and I'll figure this out on my own." James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You think you can just walk away? That's not how this works. I don't have time to explain everything right now, but you have to trust me. If you stay in your life, if you go back to that normal world you're used to, they'll come for you. Your life will never be the same. But if you stay with me, I can protect you. I'll keep you and the baby safe. But you have to make a choice." I opened my mouth to argue, but no words came. I was frozen. I didn't know what to say or how to respond. Everything was moving too fast, and I was being swept along, unable to grasp anything firmly. I looked at Oliver, my heart breaking as I realized how much of a lie everything between us had been. His world was no different from James's. It was built on lies, deception, and safety that had no real foundation. His calm, his control, it was all an illusion. I felt lost. "I don't know who to trust," I admitted quietly, tears threatening to spill. James took a step toward me, his voice softer now. "You can't trust anyone right now, but I'll keep you safe. You have to trust me. If you don't, I can't promise you'll make it out of this alive." My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to run. I wanted to escape this nightmare, this impossible situation I'd found myself in. But as I looked at James, I realized that there was no escape, not without risking everything. I took a deep breath, the weight of the decision hanging heavy on my chest. "What do I have to do?" James's eyes softened for the first time. "You just have to stay with me and trust that I'm doing this to keep you alive. No one else can protect you." And so, despite my anger, my fear, and my growing confusion, I nodded. I didn't know where this was headed. I didn't know if I'd survive it, but for the first time, I knew that I had no choice. James DeMarco's world had just become mine. The world outside the mansion blurred into a sickening whirl of motion. The black sedan, sleek and silent, moved through the night with terrifying speed. Inside, I was silent, my mind racing faster than the car could ever hope to go. Every so often, my gaze would flicker to the men in the car with me, all stoic, their eyes never leaving the road, as if nothing in this world could unnerve them. Their cold efficiency was suffocating, but it wasn't the men who kept me awake. It wasn't the promise of being dragged deeper into James DeMarco's world that kept me frozen, held captive by invisible chains. It was the knowledge that I had just crossed a line I could never uncross. I was no longer just a woman trying to build a future. I was a pawn, and I had no idea how to play this game. The car slowed as we approached a high gate, its iron bars gleaming faintly in the moonlight. A guard stepped forward, nodded to the driver, and the gates slowly creaked open. We were inside. The mansion loomed ahead like a silent, watchful beast, large, imposing, and entirely out of place in the otherwise quiet suburban neighborhood. I had been kidnapped, dragged from my wedding day, and now this was my new prison. The realization gnawed at me, setting my teeth on edge. I had been so sure my life was on a certain path, so sure that nothing would ever really threaten my safety, my autonomy. But now, I was being thrust into a world where my life meant nothing unless it was tied to something, someone else. The car came to a halt in front of the grand steps leading into the mansion. I had no idea where we were or how far we had gone from the city. Everything felt wrong. The air was thick with a sense of danger I couldn't escape, no matter how tightly I held on to my thoughts. One of the men opened the door and gestured for me to exit. I didn't move. I couldn't. "We'll help you out," the man said, his voice flat, emotionless. His eyes, dark and calculating, scanned my face for a reaction. "Get out." I didn't answer. For a moment, I stared at him, willing him to understand that I was in no mood to be moved, let alone manipulated. But it was pointless. The world outside the car had swallowed me whole the second I agreed to let James pull me from my life, and now I had no choice but to face whatever was coming. His hand, firm and unyielding, gripped my arm as he helped me out of the car. My shoes clicked sharply against the marble steps as we walked inside. The mansion's interior was just as grand as its exterior, rich, opulent, but sterile. The marble floors gleamed in the light of ornate chandeliers hanging overhead. The air smelled faintly of leather and aged wood, as though it had been untouched by time. A place that existed for one reason: to maintain an illusion of power, of control. "Come with me," the man said, leading me down a corridor lined with paintings, their eyes seeming to follow me as I passed. I didn't ask questions. I didn't dare. There was a bitter weight in my chest as I looked around, but no words could change what had already happened. I was here, a prisoner. We arrived at a door at the end of the hallway. The man opened it without knocking, and I was ushered inside. The room was large, lavishly decorated with rich velvet curtains and a king-sized bed at its center. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and there was a desk with a chair facing the window. It looked like a bedroom, but it felt like a trap. He stepped aside, giving me space, but not the freedom I so desperately wanted. "This is where you'll stay." "Stay?" I asked, my voice tight with disbelief. "You expect me to just stay here?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the door. "There's food on the table. You'll find clothes in the closet. Anything you need, someone will bring it." As he turned to leave, I finally found my voice. "And James?" "He'll be back later. Rest for now." His eyes flicked to my abdomen, the one part of me that would always give me away. "You'll need it." I was alone. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. There had been a time when I thought I could control my life, that everything had a purpose, a place, a meaning. Now, I wasn't sure if I even knew who I was anymore. Was I Amelia Shaw, the woman about to marry the man she thought she loved? Or was I just a vessel, a woman who had been used by forces I couldn't understand. I walked across the room to the window, trying to get some sense of perspective. But all I could see was the sprawling garden, manicured and pristine, its beauty a cruel reminder that everything here was too perfect, too controlled. I didn't belong here. I wasn't like them. This wasn't my world. But my stomach churned, and the baby within me kicked. It was his world. I had been swept up in it the moment the clinic had made its mistake, and now I had no choice but to accept it. Whether I wanted to or not. I sank down on the bed, burying my face in my hands. How had it all gone so wrong? The next few days blurred together, each one like the last. The house, while beautiful, had a coldness to it that made my skin crawl. I was given everything I could possibly need: clothes, food, toiletries, but there was no warmth, no comfort. It was like being trapped in a luxurious cage. I wasn't allowed to leave. The guards outside my door remained as silent as the walls around me, their presence constantly reminding me of the fact that I was no longer free. James's men came and went. Some were polite, if distant, others cold, their eyes never meeting mine as they went about their duties. I was nothing more than a prisoner, a piece of property, but even so, I couldn't ignore the small things. The little glances exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking, the way they always ensured I was well taken care of. It was like they were following orders, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice either. I began to adapt to the routine, though it didn't come easily. I spent hours in the room, only leaving to eat or when someone came to bring me something. The meals were luxurious, though I could barely bring myself to taste them. Everything felt like an effort. Even breathing felt heavy in this strange new world. But the hardest part was James. When he wasn't around, I was left alone with the weight of my thoughts. But when he came, I was reminded that I didn't know this man. Not really. He was a mystery wrapped in danger and power. I could feel the magnetism of his presence, how his eyes seemed to see through me. But there was something more, something hidden beneath that stoic exterior. It wasn't until the fourth day of my captivity that I saw a side of James I hadn't expected. I was sitting at the table in my room, trying to force myself to eat, when there was a knock at the door. Without waiting for a response, James entered, looking as immaculate as always. But this time, he wasn't alone. He held a small bundle in his hands, medications, vitamins, and a glass of water. He placed them on the table in front of me, his eyes briefly catching mine. "I thought you might need this," he said, his voice softer than usual. "It's for the baby." I looked at the glass of water, then at him, unsure what to say. "You didn't have to—" "I did," he interrupted. "You're carrying my child. I take responsibility for that." His gaze was firm, but there was something in it, something unspoken, that stopped me from arguing. James made no move to sit. He simply looked at me, waiting, as if expecting something. "You're still angry," he said finally. "I can see it in your eyes, and I understand. But this situation is not of your making." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him everything that had happened was his fault, that none of this would have happened if he hadn't forced me into this twisted reality. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed silent. "Do you want me to leave?" he asked. I shook my head. The truth was, I didn't want him to leave. Not yet. There was something in his eyes that made me want to understand him, to see if there was more to him than just a mafia boss. And yet, everything inside me screamed that I was making a mistake. "I don't want to be here," I finally whispered. James's face softened just slightly. "I know, but we both have to live with what's been done. It's not ideal, but I'll protect you." There it was again. His promise. his unwavering assurance that he was doing this to protect me, to keep me and our unborn child safe from forces that wanted to use us both. I could feel the growing connection between us, despite myself. But that didn't change the fact that I was trapped in a world I didn't belong to with a man I didn't know. "Thank you," I whispered, unable to look him in the eye. He gave a curt nod and left, the door clicking softly behind him. And just like that, I was alone again. But this time, something had changed. Whether I liked it or not, James was no longer just my captor. He was something more. And I wasn't sure if I hated that or if it was exactly what I needed. The days blurred into one long, restless stretch. The mansion had become both my cage and my refuge, a gilded prison where nothing was truly mine. I was kept in the guest suite, a room bigger than most apartments, filled with every luxury imaginable. But there was no comfort. Not anymore. Not in a place like this. I had tried to leave, of course. I'd tested every door, examined every window, and pressed against the walls as if I might somehow will a way out. But every time, without fail, someone was watching. The guards, always silent, always present, made it clear that there was no escape. And when I tried to make a run for it, James's men were always just a step ahead. They didn't chase me. They didn't need to. They just waited, silent as shadows, ready to intercept me when the moment came. I stopped trying after the third attempt. It was futile. So I did what I had to do. I stayed. I kept my head down, avoided unnecessary contact, and waited for the day when my world might go back to normal. The plan was simple. Endure. Keep my distance from James. Stay away from the life he was dragging me into. But as the days went on, something began to shift. Slowly, imperceptibly, we started to coexist. He, the dangerous Mafia boss who had kidnapped me, and I, the woman caught in a web she didn't want to be a part of. We shared the same space, and though I was still furious, though I still resented the life he had imposed upon me, I began to understand one thing. This wasn't just a game to him. He wasn't just holding me hostage for some twisted purpose. There was something deeper, something more complicated at play. The first time I spoke to James, I'd meant to keep it short, to avoid any kind of connection, but it didn't work that way. We were both in the library one evening, me sitting at a table near the window, idly flipping through a book I had no interest in, and him at the desk, working with papers and files spread in front of him. The silence between us was heavy, like a rope between two people on opposite ends. I wanted to cut it, to break it, to find some way to reclaim my voice, but I didn't know how. He spoke first, his voice as smooth and cold as ever. "You're looking for something to occupy your time. I'll have the staff bring up some books, if you'd prefer." I looked up from the book I hadn't been reading and met his eyes, unsure what to say. "I'm fine." He raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair. "If you'd like, you can go outside. I won't stop you." "Right," I muttered under my breath. "I'll just walk right past the guards. Great idea." He didn't smile, but his lips twitched in something like amusement. "You're resourceful, Amelia, but I'm afraid you're still not getting out of here." I set the book down with a snap, suddenly frustrated. "You really think I want to stay here, don't you?" He met my gaze, his expression unreadable. "No, but I think you don't have a choice." I hated how right he was. I hated that his words cut deeper than they should have. But I couldn't deny it. I didn't have a choice. At least not yet. As the days turned into weeks, James and I began to have more conversations, though I tried to keep them brief and impersonal. But that didn't work either. One evening after dinner, we sat in the drawing room by the fire. The crackling flames cast an orange glow across the room, painting everything in warm hues. I had no particular desire to talk, but the silence between us stretched long and tight, and I couldn't keep it anymore. "What happened to your family?" I asked, surprising myself. The question had been on my mind for a while, but I'd always stopped myself from asking. Maybe I was just tired of pretending I didn't care. James's face didn't change, but I saw something in his eyes, a flicker, a shadow that passed so quickly I almost missed it. "My family?" He looked at me as if considering whether or not to answer. "What about them? Why did you get involved in this life?" I asked. "You could have chosen a different path, a different life. You could have—" "You think I chose this?" he interrupted, his voice tinged with bitterness. "You think anyone chooses this life?" I paused. "I don't know, but it's not like you don't have power, James. You could have walked away." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, and for the first time since I'd met him, his demeanor wasn't as controlled. There was a rawness to him, an openness that unsettled me. "You don't know what it's like to grow up with this—" He gestured to the mansion, to the life that seemed to choke him as much as it gave him power. "You don't know what it's like to be born into something you can never escape." His voice softened. "It's not as easy as you think, Amelia. People like me don't get to choose, not really. Not when your family's legacy is this dark." For a moment, I saw the person beneath the facade, the man who had been forged by a cruel and unforgiving world, a world where betrayal and bloodshed were just part of the job. He wasn't some untouchable monster. He was a product of the very world he was trying to control. I didn't know what to say to that. What could I say? I had no idea what it was like to live a life like his, where loyalty and family meant something twisted, something darker than I could comprehend. It wasn't long before I found out more about his family, the family that had shaped him into the man he was. His father, a ruthless man who built an empire on blood and fear, had died when James was just a teenager. He had inherited everything: his father's empire, his reputation, his enemies. But there was more to it. There were scars that ran deeper than what the eye could see. "I wasn't always the way I am," James admitted one night, after I pressed him for more details about his past. I tried. I tried to be someone else. But it didn't matter. Not when your bloodline runs so deep, so tangled with everything you've been taught." I looked at him, seeing the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes lost their coldness for a moment. He was hurting, the kind of hurt that could never fully heal, the kind of hurt that made people like him do things they couldn't undo. "I don't have a choice," he said quietly. "Not now. Not anymore." I felt a pang in my chest. It wasn't sympathy, not exactly. But I could understand the weight of obligation, the weight of family that kept you chained to a world you didn't want. I had been raised with the idea of stability, of knowing that I would always have a place to belong, to feel safe. James had never had that. He was a man forged by violence, by fear, by loss. And as much as I wanted to hate him for what he had done to me, for what he was forcing me to become a part of, I couldn't deny the connection that was growing between us. He wasn't just a mafia boss. He was a man who had been shaped by his circumstances, a man who had never had the luxury of choosing his own fate. I wanted to push it all away. I wanted to keep the distance between us. But with every conversation, with every word he shared, I found myself seeing him differently. I didn't know if I could trust him. I didn't know if I should, but I couldn't deny that a part of me, despite all the danger, all the anger, all the fear, was beginning to care. As the weeks passed, I realized I was no longer just a captive in his world. I had become something more. Something that couldn't be easily dismissed, and neither could he. The silence in the mansion had become stifling. Each day I grew more aware of the weight pressing down on me, the weight of James's world, the weight of my pregnancy, the weight of secrets I had barely begun to uncover. The walls around me were closing in, but I still had no idea how to break free, no idea who to trust, or even if I could trust myself anymore. I had spent the last few days in near isolation, retreating to my room after the unsettling conversation with James about his past. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being suffocated, that everything in this house was built on lies. James's enemies were closing in, and I was caught in the middle of it all. But it wasn't just his enemies I had to fear. It was the way they had infiltrated every part of my life, the way they had been pulling the strings long before I even knew I was part of this twisted game. I had been trying to make sense of it all when James's men, the ones who acted as guards and errand runners, began to let slip fragments of information. Little things, things I could barely connect, until the pieces started to form a picture too ugly to ignore. One night, after dinner, I sat in the drawing room alone, staring at the fire as it crackled and popped. The room was eerily quiet. I had stopped counting the days, but it felt like a lifetime since my wedding, since my life had been ripped apart. That was when it happened. One of James's men entered the room, a man named Marco, who had been tasked with bringing me meals and sometimes just checking in on me. He wasn't one of the cold-faced guards, but neither was he friendly. He was quiet, stoic, and always respectful. He seemed to look right through me as if I were just another part of the furniture. But tonight, Marco was different. His usual guarded expression was gone, replaced with something darker, more urgent. "Miss Shaw," he began, his voice dull. "I need to speak with you." I turned to him, startled. "What is it?" "I think you need to know something," he said quietly, "about your involvement with the DeMarco family." A chill ran down my spine. "What are you talking about?" Marco glanced around the room before taking a step closer. "You're not just caught in the crossfire, Miss Shaw. The people who've been after James for years, well, they've infiltrated everything. Your life, his life, your past." I frowned, the confusion twisting my stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying they're not just criminals. They're everywhere. They're connected to people you trust, people you've known your whole life." Marco's eyes darted to the door, then to the shadows in the corner of the room. "They've been watching you, watching your every move, and now they've turned you into a pawn." The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of their implications. I shook my head, unable to process it. This can't be true." Marco nodded, his gaze steady but grim. "It's true. And you've been part of the game for much longer than you realize." Suddenly, everything I thought I knew about my life felt like a lie. My marriage to Oliver, the life I'd built with him, was it all just an illusion? I thought I was safe, that I could control my own destiny. But now, I was trapped in a world I didn't even understand. The next morning, I confronted Oliver. He had been my fiancé, the man I was supposed to marry, the man I had trusted with everything. But now, with what Marco had said, I couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion in my gut. There were too many pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit. When Oliver walked into the room, his face lit up in that familiar calm smile. But I wasn't fooled anymore. "Amelia," he greeted me warmly, though there was a nervous edge to his voice. "You're up early. Everything okay?" "No," I said sharply, cutting him off before he could finish. "No, everything is not okay. Not anymore." Oliver blinked, clearly thrown by my tone. "What's wrong?" "Tell me the truth," I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "I need to know what's really going on. I need to know what you're hiding." He took a step back, his posture stiffening, the smile fading from his face. "What are you talking about? I'm not hiding anything, Amelia. You know I'd never keep secrets from you." "Really?" I said bitterly. "Because I'm starting to think that everything I thought I knew about you was a lie." Oliver's eyes darkened, and for the first time since we'd met, I saw something cold in them. Amelia, this isn't the time for— No, I want the truth, I interrupted. Tell me what you're involved in. Tell me about the people you've been working with. I know something's been going on. I know you're not just a simple man with a quiet life, Oliver. Who are you, really? For a long moment, he just stood there, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he let out a sigh and dropped his gaze to the floor. I never wanted you to get involved in this, but it's too late now. His voice was low, almost reluctant. I've been trying to protect you, Amelia. I've been trying to keep you safe from the things I've done. But the truth is, I've been working with James's enemies. I froze, the words hitting me like a slap across the face. What? It was supposed to be temporary, Oliver said, stepping closer. I was just trying to get ahead, to make sure I had a future. But things got out of hand. James's family, they have eyes everywhere. And now I'm caught in the middle. You're involved now too, whether you want to be or not. My mind reeled as I tried to process what he was saying. So you've been lying to me all this time? About everything? I never meant for you to get dragged into this, he said, his voice strained. I wanted to keep you out of it, but when I found out about you and James's— The baby, I interrupted, my voice growing tight. You knew, didn't you? You knew it wasn't just some random mistake. You knew that I was being used. Oliver's face tightened with guilt. I didn't know about the baby, no, but I knew about the plan, about the way they were going to use you. I backed away from him, my mind spinning, my heart shattering. I can't trust you anymore, Oliver. I can't. I didn't want this, he shouted, stepping forward to grab my arm, but I jerked away, horrified. Amelia, please. I didn't want this to happen. You have to understand. I don't, I said, my voice breaking. I don't understand anything anymore. After the confrontation with Oliver, I retreated to my room, feeling more alone than ever. I couldn't believe I had been so blind. Oliver, the man I thought I could trust above all others, had been working against me, against James all along. But even now, despite the betrayal, I found myself thinking about James. When he came to me later that evening, I barely looked up from the window. The mansion was quiet, the night air cool against my skin. I had no energy left to pretend, no desire to hold on to my anger any longer. I'm sorry, James said softly, his voice filled with an emotion I couldn't place, for everything that's happened, for what you've been dragged into. I didn't answer him at first, but then I felt him sit beside me on the window seat. You don't need to apologize, I whispered. I never asked for any of this. I know, he said quietly, but it's still my responsibility. I don't belong here, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. I don't know what's real anymore. You say you'll protect me, but what does that even mean? What am I supposed to do with this life you've forced me into? You'll do what you need to survive, he said, his voice low. And I'll be there, Amelia. I won't let anything happen to you, to our child. His words were a promise, one that I wanted to believe, but couldn't fully trust. The truth was, I wasn't sure how to feel anymore. Everything was a blur. I didn't know if I could ever return to the life I had, but I also knew I couldn't stay here forever. James's promise echoed in my mind, as haunting as it was comforting. I'll protect you, he had said. But could I believe it? Could I trust him? The sound of shattering glass was the first warning I got. It was late, and the mansion was as quiet as it ever was. Too quiet. I had grown used to the silence, the eerie stillness that filled the house when James wasn't around. My days were spent in limbo, trapped in a life I didn't want but couldn't escape. I had stopped trying to fight back. What was the point? I was pregnant with James's child, my world a jigsaw puzzle of secrets, lies, and betrayal. And I was living in the heart of it, with no idea how to get out. I had just settled into bed, the sheets cool against my skin, when the first loud crash echoed from somewhere below. My heart lurched, and my eyes snapped wide open. Another crash followed, louder this time, followed by shouting. My blood ran cold. I scrambled out of bed, the sound of boots pounding the floor below sending my pulse into overdrive. My mind raced through a million scenarios. But one thing was clear. Something was happening. Something dangerous. The mansion wasn't safe anymore. I rushed to the door, but before I could open it, it slammed against the wall. Marco, the guard who had been assigned to watch me, stepped inside, his face grim. His eyes flickered nervously to me before he barked, "Stay here. Lock the door. Don't come out." "Why? What's happening?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Stay inside," he snapped. Without waiting for a response, he turned and disappeared, the door closing softly behind him. I stood frozen for a moment, the sounds of chaos below growing louder. The door was locked. I had no weapons, no way to defend myself. But my mind wouldn't let me stay put. It wouldn't let me hide while James and his men fought off whatever storm was raging in the heart of the mansion. The attack. It was real. It was happening. And I was part of it now, whether I wanted to be or not. I didn't know how much time passed before I finally moved, but when I did, it was with a quiet desperation. I moved to the window, my heart hammering in my chest as I peeked out through the heavy curtains. The mansion's garden, usually serene and peaceful, was now lit by flashing lights from armed vehicles surrounding the property. The scene outside looked like a war zone. Men in tactical gear were positioned around the perimeter, their guns drawn, their movements swift and coordinated. I caught a glimpse of James then, standing in front of the grand steps, his face hard as stone, his men in formation around him. His eyes scanned the chaos, a calm intensity radiating from him. He was in control. But that control didn't last long. A shot rang out, piercing the night. James's head snapped in the direction of the noise, and in that instant, everything changed. The front door of the mansion burst open, and armed men poured inside, their guns raised. I froze, my heart crashing into my ribs. The chaos that had been outside was now inside. This was no longer just an attack on the mansion. It was an attack on James, and, by extension, on me. Gunshots erupted, followed by shouts from downstairs. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, and I could feel the tension in every breath I took. I should have been hiding. I should have been scared, but I couldn't move. I couldn't just sit there and pretend that this wasn't happening. But before I could make a move, the door to my room slammed open. Marco and another guard rushed in, urgency in their every movement. "Amelia, come with us. Now," Marco barked. I didn't hesitate. I followed them down the hall, my breath caught in my throat, my pulse echoing in my ears. Every turn, every corridor felt unfamiliar now. We moved quickly, but I could hear the chaos in the background, the sounds of gunfire, the screams, the villains. It was closing in, and I was caught in the middle of it. We reached a back staircase that led down to the lower level of the house. "Stay close," Marco ordered, his hand gripping my arm tightly as we moved toward a hidden door at the end of the hallway. I had never seen this door before. It looked like it belonged to another world, a world I wasn't supposed to see. We stepped into a small, reinforced room, and Marco slammed the door shut behind us. My eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, but the fear didn't fade. I could hear the sounds of combat raging outside, shouting, gunfire, the unmistakable sound of men fighting for their lives. "I need to call James," I whispered, panic rising in my chest. Marco shook his head. No contact with anyone. It's too dangerous. I didn't care. I didn't care about anything anymore but James's safety and mine. I turned, my fingers trembling as I reached for the phone in my pocket. Before I could dial, the door flew open. One of James's men stood there, his face bloodied but determined. Amelia, we need to move. James is holding the front line, but they're getting closer. You're a target now. I didn't ask questions. I followed him as we made our way back down the corridor, my mind racing. James was fighting. He was out there, keeping his men safe, holding off the attackers. But how long could he last? The hallway seemed endless as we made our way deeper into the mansion. Every corner felt like a turn into darkness. I wanted to hide. I wanted to run away and pretend I was somewhere else, anywhere else but here. But the truth was unavoidable. I was in it. This was my life now. We reached another door, but before I could push it open, a man's voice stopped me. Amelia. James's voice was clear, but there was something in it, something urgent, desperate. Get behind me, now! I turned to look at him, standing in the hallway, his back to me as he scanned the area. He was a man of few words, but in that moment, I could see the fear in his eyes, fear not for himself, but for me, for the baby. I stepped closer, my heart in my throat. What's happening, James? What are we going to do? He turned to face me, his eyes locking with mine, his jaw set in determination. We fight, and I keep you safe. That's the plan. I wanted to argue, to tell him that I didn't belong in this world, that I didn't want any part of this fight, but the words wouldn't come. The weight of the situation was too heavy. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the truth. I didn't have a choice. I could keep fighting, keep resisting, or I could accept the truth of my situation and stand by James's side. I looked at him, seeing the man behind the Mafia boss, the man who had risked everything to keep me safe, to protect the child I carried. And in that moment, something shifted in me. I could no longer deny the connection between us. I could no longer pretend that I wasn't a part of this life. I'll stay, I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. I'll fight with you. James nodded, his lips curling into a small, relieved smile. Good. And in that moment, I knew. I wasn't just Amelia Shaw anymore. I wasn't just a woman trapped in a dangerous world. I was part of it now. And I would do whatever it took to survive. The attack on the mansion was only the beginning. The violence was only escalating, and I couldn't stay in the shadows anymore. I had chosen a side. And though it was terrifying, it was also freeing. As the fight continued, I stood beside James, his men holding their ground around us. The sound of gunfire, the chaos of the attack, it was all so real, so raw, and in the midst of it, I realized that I wasn't just a passive observer. I was an active participant in this war. James's eyes never left me, always checking that I was safe, always keeping me close. His protectiveness was suffocating, but I understood it now. He wasn't just a mafia boss. He was a man who would do anything to protect the people he cared about, even if that meant fighting a war he had no choice but to fight. The house shook with the force of an explosion, the walls trembling as the sound of gunfire echoed through the air. But we didn't flinch. We kept moving forward. This was my new life now. This was my world. And as the battle raged around me, I finally understood that I had a choice. I could keep fighting against it, or I could embrace it. And for better or worse, I had chosen to fight, with James, with my child, and with the future we would build together, no matter the cost. The heavy silence in the mansion felt unbearable as I sat in the study, my eyes scanning the room, unsure where to focus. The usual luxury that surrounded me, rich mahogany bookshelves, thick velvet curtains, and the glowing fireplace had all lost their warmth. Every piece of decor now felt cold, like reminders of a life I no longer recognized. James had returned from his meeting with his men, his face more etched with tension than I'd seen before. The calm, calculated exterior he usually wore was gone. I could sense that something had shifted, something more dangerous was in motion. He had always kept his distance from me, but now the distance between us was palpable, charged with an energy I couldn't ignore. I didn't have to ask. The worry in his eyes told me everything. "We need to talk," James said, his voice low and strained, as he sat across from me at the table. I nodded, waiting for him to continue, but my mind already raced with questions. After the attack on the mansion, we both knew things had escalated, but I had no idea just how much danger we were in. The enemy had already made their move, but who were they really? And what was their endgame? "Tell me," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "What's going on, James? Who's behind this?" James leaned forward, his fingers pressing into the wood of the table. His expression was unreadable, but I could see the weight of the burden he was carrying. His world was crashing down around him, and I was caught in the middle. "It's worse than I thought," James muttered, rubbing his eyes as if trying to fight off the exhaustion that had set in. "The attack wasn't just some isolated hit, Amelia. It's the beginning of something much bigger." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart rate picking up again. "Who's behind it?" "The DeMarco family," he said, his voice dark. "And the Kronikis, the two most powerful Mafia families in the city. They've come together, and they've made it their mission to destroy me, to destroy us." I felt a chill slide down my spine as I processed his words. The DeMarcos, the Kronikis, the families I had only heard of in passing. But now they weren't just names in the dark corners of the criminal world. They were real, and they were coming after us. "They've joined forces?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. James nodded. "They have. They've been planning this for months. The DeMarcos have been taking out my operations one by one, slowly weakening me. The Kronikis have been pulling strings in the background. They've had eyes on my every move. They've been playing the long game, and now they're targeting you, our baby." I was silent for a long moment, the weight of his words settling in like a rock in my stomach. This wasn't just about James anymore. It was about my life, my child's life. It was about the future that had been stolen from me. "Why me? Why the baby?" I whispered, my throat tight. "They know the baby is my heir. They think that if they take you out, if they take our child, it will destroy me. It will leave me vulnerable. And they'll use that leverage to tear everything I've built apart." His voice was filled with anger, but it was more than that. There was fear, too. Fear for me, for the bae, a fear I had never seen in him before. "You didn't want any of this," I said quietly, almost to myself. He looked up at me, his gaze fierce. "I never wanted this life for you. But it's too late now. They've made this personal, and I won't let them win. Not now, not after everything I've sacrificed." I saw the pain in his eyes, the burden of the choices he had made. He was a man trapped in a war he never wanted to fight, and now I was part of that war whether I liked it or not. I stood up, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. What could I do? How could I help? This wasn't my fight. I had been dragged into this world, but the longer I stayed in it, the more I realized that I wasn't some passive observer. I couldn't just hide behind James. I couldn't keep pretending that I wasn't part of his world, that I wasn't just as much of a target as he was. "I'm not staying here and waiting to be a victim, James," I said, my voice steady, despite the fear that was clawing at me from the inside. I can't just sit here while you fight this alone. He looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying that I'm not going to just be protected anymore. I can help you. I want to help you. James didn't say anything at first, his gaze fixed on me, studying me with an intensity that made me squirm under the weight of it. For a moment, I thought he might push back, tell me I was being naive. But then he stood up, walking toward me, his face hard as stone. You don't understand what you're getting into, he said softly, his voice low and dangerous. These people will stop at nothing to get what they want. And you'll be in the thick of it. You'll be targeted. You won't be safe. I'm already in it, I shot back, my voice louder now. I'm carrying your child. There's no going back. And I refuse to sit in the background while everything falls apart. His eyes darkened, and for a moment, I saw something flicker behind them, something almost painful. I won't lose you, he said, his words almost a growl. I'm not asking you to lose me, I replied, stepping closer to him, my voice stronger now. But I can't be helpless. I can't be the one who hides in the corner while you fight. If we're going to get out of this, we have to do it together. I watched as James's expression shifted. There was a long pause, as if he were debating something inside himself, something he didn't want to admit. Then, finally, he spoke. You're right, he said, his voice resigned. We do this together, but understand this. If you're in, you're all in. No backing out. Once we go down this road, there's no turning back. I nodded. I'm ready. Let's do this. Over the next few days, James's enemies closed in. The attacks on his businesses grew more frequent, the pressure more intense. But now, I was no longer just a spectator. I was part of the plans. James didn't sugarcoat anything. He made sure I understood the risks, the dangers of what we were about to do. But he also made sure I had a role, my knowledge, my intelligence, my connections outside of his world were all assets he could use. And so, I became involved in every detail, every meeting, every move. The more I learned, the more I understood. The more I saw the depth of James's world, the intricate web of alliances and enemies, of deceit and loyalty. There was no room for hesitation, no time for second-guessing. We had to move fast, act decisively, or we would lose everything. In the days that followed, we made our first strike. With my help, James's men infiltrated one of the DeMarco family's safe houses. I provided them with the intel they needed, locations, names, and escape routes that had been buried deep in my memory from years of training as a vet. I had never imagined that those skills would be used in a world like this. But here I was, guiding James's team through the chaos, helping them take down one of the biggest threats to his family's empire. And with every success, every move we made together, I felt the bond between us grow stronger. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about a shared purpose, about a future, our future. As I stood beside James after the mission was completed, watching his men prepare for the next phase, I finally understood. I was no longer just a pawn in his world. I was a partner. And I wasn't going to let anything tear us apart. The world we lived in was dangerous, and the threats were greater than I had ever imagined. But now, I was ready to fight for the life I had with James, for the child we were bringing into this world. And together, we would fight until the very end. The mansion was silent, the kind of silence that wraps itself around you like a heavy shroud, thick with anticipation. The kind of silence that only comes before everything you've worked for, everything you've fought for, teeters on the edge of collapse. James stood at the window, his back rigid, his profile sharp against the glow of the setting sun. The soft orange light highlighted the steely tension in his features, making him appear even more like the ruthless mafia boss I had come to understand him to be. The man who had once been my captor, my protector, was now my partner. But as I looked at him, the weight of the world on his shoulders, I wondered if he ever thought he could have had another life, a life not steeped in violence and bloodshed. "Amelia," he said, his voice low but strong. "This is it. This is the last move." I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never been more certain of anything in my life than I was of this moment. The world I had once known, the world of normalcy and predictable rhythms, had been shattered the day James walked into my life. But now, this was it. This was the war to end all wars, the final confrontation, the battle for control, for our family's future, and for the love we had somehow managed to build amidst all the chaos. I knew what was at stake: our lives, our child, the empire James had built, and the enemies who wanted to tear it all down. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. James turned to face me, his eyes dark with a mixture of determination and something else I couldn't quite place. He walked toward me, his movements deliberate. His hand found mine, pulling me closer. For a moment, everything else faded. The battle, the gunfire, the world outside. "You don't have to do this, Amelia," he said, his voice softer now, almost tender. "You've already been through enough. I can't lose you." "You won't lose me," I replied, squeezing his hand. "We're in this together, James. We always have been." He searched my eyes for a moment as if trying to read something deeper, something beyond the surface. Finally, he nodded. "You're right. Together." The words felt like a vow, a promise I would hold on to no matter what came next. The final assault on our enemies wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for our future, for everything we had built in the chaos of the last few months. The DeMarcos, the Kernickis, every enemy James had accumulated over the years had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the chance to strike the blow that would take him down once and for all. We had planned this meticulously. James had used every connection, every resource at his disposal to ensure the final blow would land hard and swift. Every move had been calculated, but the stakes were higher than ever. James and his men, armed, prepared, and relentless, were ready to make their final push. I had seen them operate, seen the precision and skill with which they moved. But tonight, something felt different. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on my chest. It was time. I stood beside James as he briefed his men, each one of them taking their positions around the mansion and the surrounding grounds. Marco, as always, was at his side. But this time, I could feel the shift in the dynamics. This wasn't just James's war anymore. It was ours. "You're sure about this?" Marco asked James, his voice a mixture of respect and concern. James didn't answer at first. He simply nodded, his eyes cold and unwavering. "Amelia's part of this," he said firmly. "No one's going to stop her." I could feel the weight of their words, but I wasn't afraid. I had never been more certain of anything than I was right now. I wasn't going to hide behind James, not anymore. I wasn't going to watch him fight this battle alone. I had been training for this moment, learning their strategies, understanding their tactics, and becoming part of the plan. My role wasn't just to hide and wait for the battle to end. It was to fight alongside him, to protect the future we were building, even if that meant stepping into the lion's den and fighting back. The first shots rang out as the enemy's forces moved in. The deafening sound of gunfire filled the air, and chaos erupted all around us. The mansion, once a symbol of safety, was now a battleground. But James was in his element, calm, methodical, as he barked orders and took control of the situation. His men responded with precision, moving swiftly to eliminate the threats as they came. I stayed close, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the explosions in the distance, the screeching of tires as the enemy's vehicles approached. I had always known this day would come, but nothing could have prepared me for the violence of it. The world was collapsing around us, and there was no turning back. As we moved through the mansion, I caught glimpses of the fight outside, of James's men clashing with our enemies. It was a brutal, bloody confrontation, but we were winning. Slowly but surely, we were pushing them back. Every move they made was countered. Every plan they had was thwarted. But just as I thought we were gaining ground, a loud explosion shook the house, throwing me off balance. I barely managed to keep my footing as the walls trembled, dust falling from the ceiling. The lights flickered before going out entirely, leaving us in complete darkness. For a moment, everything went still. The only sounds I could hear were the distant crackle of gunfire and the heavy breathing of those around me. "Amelia!" James's voice cut through the dark. I turned to see him standing there, his face lit only by the faint glow of the emergency lights. His eyes were focused, sharp with intensity. "Stay close. We're almost there." I nodded, my heart racing. I followed him, moving quickly through the darkened hallways. The mansion was being torn apart around us, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had a purpose now. I had a reason to fight. We reached the main hall just as the last of the enemy forces made their push toward the central room. I could see the men advancing, weapons drawn, but they didn't see us. Not yet. James motioned for me to stay low. We waited in silence, watching as the enemy grew closer. Then, in one fluid motion, we struck. The silence of the moment shattered as James's men took down the first wave of attackers, their guns blazing with precision. The battle was nearing its end, but the cost was high. We lost men. We lost resources. But we were still standing. And in that moment, as the final enemy forces fell, I knew we had won. The DeMarcos and the Kernickys had lost. The war was over. The aftermath of the battle was quiet. Too quiet. I stood beside James in the ruined mansion, the dust and debris from the attack still hanging in the air. The once beautiful home was now a war zone, a symbol of everything we had lost. James didn't say much as we surveyed the damage. His men were already working to clean up, to ensure that no trace of the battle remained. But I could see the toll it had taken on him. The weight of the decisions he had made, the lives lost, the price he had paid, was visible in the lines of his face. "We did it," I said softly, breaking the silence. James nodded, but it wasn't the triumphant nod I expected. It was somber, heavy with the realization of what it had cost. "We did," he replied, his voice hoarse. "But at what cost?" I looked around at the destruction, the broken walls, the bloodstains, the bodies of our enemies scattered across the floor. "It's over now, though. We've won." James turned to face me, his eyes locking onto mine. "We've won, but we've lost so much. This war, it changes everything. We've destroyed everything, Amelia. The world we knew is gone. We can't go back." I felt a pang in my chest at his words. He was right. Everything had changed. But in the end, it had been worth it. We had fought for our love, for our child, and for a future that we could finally control. "It's not over yet," I said, my voice firm. "But we'll rebuild. We'll make it ours." James didn't reply at first. Instead, he pulled me close, his hand resting gently on my abdomen. "You're right. We'll rebuild." And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just a survivor of this war. I was part of it. I was part of the future we were building together. We had fought through the bloodshed, through the lies, and through the chaos. And now, we had a chance to create something real, a future for our child, a future for us. The battle was over, but our fight was just beginning. And this time, we would fight together. The air felt different now, lighter, free of the oppressive weight that had hung over us for so long. The mansion, once a fortress under siege, now seemed to breathe with a quiet calm. The echoes of gunfire and violence that had filled these walls for months had faded, leaving room for something else to take root, something new, something I could hardly dare to believe in. Amelia's hand rested lightly on my chest as we stood together by the windows, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The world outside was peaceful now, the quiet of the evening a stark contrast to the chaos we'd lived through. The sounds of life, the rustling of trees in the breeze, the distant hum of the city, were a reminder that the battle, for now, was over. But the war we'd fought together had changed us both, and now there was only one thing left to do: rebuild. I watched Amelia as she placed her hand gently over her growing belly, her fingers tracing the curve of our child, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of protectiveness flood my chest. Every inch of this woman, this family we were creating, was precious to me. What had begun as a dark and violent union was now becoming something more, something worth fighting for. We had spent months tangled in a web of lies, betrayal, and bloodshed, but now it was just the two of us and our child. The world we were about to bring our son or daughter into would be different. It had to be. "The doctors said it's going to be soon," Amelia said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The excitement, mixed with nerves, was evident in her tone. "I can feel it. They said the baby is growing perfectly." I nodded, my own hand moving to rest over hers on her belly. I know I can't wait to meet him or her, to start our life outside all of this. I didn't need to say more. The unspoken words between us were enough. We had spent too long in the shadows, always running, always fighting for survival. But now we could step into the light. The Mafia's grip on our lives was broken. The DeMarcos and Kernickis had been defeated. Their hold on this world, on me, had crumbled with their defeat. And though it hadn't been without sacrifice, it felt as though we were finally free. We had work to do. The empire I had built, my criminal empire, needed to be carefully recalibrated. The pieces of it scattered, fractured by the war. But the foundations were still there, strong, and ready for the next chapter. It wasn't going to be easy. Rebuilding wouldn't be quick. But for the first time in a long while, I felt hope rise in my chest. And Amelia. She wasn't just my wife now, she was my partner in this. The woman who had seen me at my lowest and still stood by my side. Together, we could create something that would last, something beyond the violence and the blood. "I want to help," she said, as though reading my thoughts. "I want to be part of this with you, not just stay in the background." I looked at her, surprised by her words. For so long, I had kept her away from this world, afraid of what it would do to her. But now, after everything we had been through, I knew she was capable of far more than I had given her credit for. "You don't have to, Amelia," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "You've been through enough. You've earned peace." She shook her head, her eyes fierce with determination. "I'm not asking for peace. I'm asking for a future, for our future." And in that moment, I knew she wasn't just asking to be involved. She was asking to be my equal, to stand with me, not behind me. And that meant everything. "We'll do it together," I said, my voice resolute. Whatever comes next, we'll do it together. The next few months were filled with small, everyday moments that I had never imagined I would experience. The kind of moments that most people take for granted. But for us, they were something new, something beautiful. I had never known peace like this before. The constant threat of death, of betrayal, had always loomed over me. But now, in the quiet moments with Amelia, in the safety of our home, I was learning to appreciate the small things, the way Amelia smiled when she caught me looking at her, the way our child's movements had become a comforting reminder of the future we were about to build. We were living for the first time in a world of stability, surrounded by people who cared about us. In a life where love and loyalty were no longer just weapons we wielded, but something to nurture and protect. Amelia's pregnancy was progressing smoothly. As the days passed, we made plans for our future, not just as a family, but as a couple. The wedding we'd postponed, the life we had envisioned before the world exploded into chaos, now it felt within reach. The simple things that had once felt like distant dreams were now becoming realities. I had been hesitant to let myself believe in the possibility of a life beyond the violence. But Amelia's quiet strength, her determination to move forward, had shown me that we could have everything. We could build a family. We could rebuild our lives, brick by brick. And we were doing it together. The sun was setting as we sat outside, the warm glow of the evening filling the courtyard. I watched Amelia as she leaned back in the chair, her hand resting gently over her stomach. She was beautiful, radiant in a way I had never seen before. The soft glow of the light, the way she seemed to glow from within, made me wonder how I had ever survived without her. I stood up and walked over to her, kneeling beside her chair. "Are you ready for this?" I asked, my voice soft but full of meaning. "Our future? Everything we've dreamed of?" She looked at me, her eyes bright with the love we had fought for. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady, filled with a quiet certainty. "We've fought through so much, James. Now it's time to build the future we deserve. Together." Her words settled over me like a warm embrace. She was right. We had fought for this moment, for this life. And now it was within our grasp. I took her hand in mine, squeezing it gently. "I love you, Amelia, and I promise you I'll never stop fighting for you, for our family." The look she gave me was one of quiet strength. She didn't need words to tell me what she felt. The love in her eyes spoke louder than anything. "I love you too, James," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And I'll fight with you every step of the way." We sat in the quiet of the evening, the cool breeze brushing against our faces. Our future stretched out before us, full of promise and possibility. The chaos that had defined our lives for so long was behind us, and now we were ready to start a new chapter, together. The baby inside her kicked once more, a gentle reminder of the life we had created in the midst of the storm. A new beginning, a future of our own making. It was time to step into the light.